The CRL Rights Commission will brief the media on the outcomes of its meeting called to discuss and determine the kinds and nature of interventions that need to be undertaken to protect and preserve the life of initiates. About 23 young men have died in the Eastern Cape. Let's cross live to those proceedings now.
Young men to adulthood. In so doing, the practice, both present and in the past, served to inculcate the value of Ubuntu, respect, humanity, hard work, defense of community and families. The practice was highly valued because it enhanced and advanced the responsible citizenship where young men are brought up with the interest of the community at heart. The commission which gathered here today has observed with dismay that in given instances, the cultural practice of initiation robs families and communities of young people who either die or suffer genital amputations. The deaths of around 22 initiates are clearly a violation of the sanctity of human life. The true and authentic traditional practice of initiation must be measured and judged by its ability to care and preserve the lives of the young initiates. The deaths and amputations suffered by those young people can never be tolerated, especially considering the fact that during the same period last year, about 17 boys had lost their lives. Particularly, it was due to similar concerns, challenges, and reasons which made CRL Rights Commission in 2017 to conduct hearings in various provinces with the aim of ascertaining the nature and extent of challenges experienced at various initiation schools. At the conclusion of these hearings, the Commission released a report outlining a number of recommendations with respect to what needed to be done in order to protect and preserve the lives of young men who participate in the cultural practice. The findings from these hearings also caused the CRL Commission to suspend any initiation practices in Gauteng for 2 years until certain conditions were complied with. The CRL Commission strongly believes that these challenges and deaths could have been avoided and prevented if all the stakeholders had adhered to the guidelines and the recommendations which were extensively shared with government departments and non-government organizations. Some of the major concerns which CRL Commission repeatedly highlighted in the with the initial stakeholders have been the following: continued kidnapping and abduction of children to illegal initiation schools, ongoing criminal activities disguised as initiation activities, unwillingness by some police stations to enforce the laws, especially when cases of missing children have been reported, daring attitudes of some operators of those illegal institutions who behave as if they were above the law. Pursuant to our mandate of promotion and protection of the rights of cultural communities, we appeal and call upon all traditional leaders to address the causes of deaths of initiates in their care at all initiation schools throughout the country. The Commission calls upon all the key players in this space to do everything in their power to promote the sanctity and preserve and protect life. Furthermore, the CRL Rights Commission calls upon the law enforcement agencies to bring to book those who have been responsible for the loss of lives. With regard to the current deaths, around 22 initiates, CRL Rights Commission unequivocally declares a suspension of the initiation schools and practice for a year in 4 affected regions of the Eastern Cape, especially where deaths occurred, until compliance matters are comprehensively addressed. In the meantime, the following should be addressed, resolved forthwith. Rescue and remove the initiates who are still in those in those centers where deaths occurred. Engage various structures to address the abuse and the commercialization of the practice. Appeals to fathers, to guardians, to sponsors to be available and accompany their boys during the initiation season. To address criminality at some of the initiation schools. Calls for the identification, restructuring, and capacitation of dysfunctional local initiation communities or committees. Yes, we as a commission have come to this conclusion because we believe that culture does not kill. Everyone has the right to life. We therefore implore our communities to refrain from using culture as an instrument of death, because where there is culture, the community mourns. I thank you.
Well, thank you, Chairperson. We will be taking some few questions, but in order to make sure that it's easy for the colleagues in the media, I will introduce the commissioners that are sitting around here so that any of them that might give additional inputs, at least you know who they are, okay? We've got Commissioner Langa, who is here in front of us, okay? Next to him, we've got Commissioner Ndembe, okay? Right on the other side, we've got Commissioner Musala, and then next to her, we've got Commissioner Water. And then next to him, we've got Commissioner Khan. Next to her, we've got Commissioner Chamzauchi. Next to her, we've got Commissioner Skuma. And then next to him, we've got Commissioner Dlamini. We are going to be taking some few questions. A statement is going to be circulated within the next few minutes so that at least you can refer to it or take some we will take some few questions. I know some of the media houses are live, so we'll take cognizance of that. We'll take about 4 questions, in the initial rounds, and then after that we'll come back and take further questions. If you can, for the purpose and the sake of the commissioners, mention your name as well as the media house you represent, then your question. I've noted some questions, some hands. Let me start here, and then that side, then this side, and then this side, yeah.
It's Tando Kudera from Eyewitness News. Commissioner, have you let these affected initiation phases know about this suspension? And what happens if people then carry on and continue practicing? Are there any measures that you put in place to prevent them from doing so? You're working with law enforcement, those type of initiatives.
Good afternoon. I'm Cassandra Lewis from SABC Television. Well, just perhaps I didn't hear you well. Are you saying that initiation schools in the 4 affected areas in the Eastern Cape those initiation schools should stop operating for a particular period of time? If we could just have some direct clarity on that. And also, what then happens in a situation like this? This keeps reoccurring. Every June and December, we're talking the same thing. What then needs to happen? The health department is on the ground in the Eastern Cape currently. We saw some of the executive in that province visit this initiation school, but nothing seems to be changing. Perhaps next year this time we'll be in this room again having the very same discussion. So would this suspension, if I heard you correctly, be effective? Also, if you could clarify which particular areas specifically for purposes of proper reporting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's take the third question.
Cindy Wetachaneni from The Citizen. My question is similar to my colleagues from the EWN. Basically, I'd like to understand how exactly the process of ensuring that everybody you're directing these recommendations to is actually going to have a way of abiding by those recommendations. Some of them require law enforcement to be involved. You mentioned rescuing. And also what will happen if you're removing the operation of certain schools in certain areas. In effect, you're moving a whole bunch of initiates to have to practice at another region, because because of culture, they're not going to stop doing the practice. They're simply going to go to where they're allowed to do it. So, have you made contingency plans, in this policy making process to make sure that now the schools that will be inundated with people who have been moved because of schools that have been suspended for this period to actually be able to practice this?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Hosopoto from Kaya FM News. Chair, I'd like to know, based on the questions of my colleagues around should people continue on, would there be, are you working with law enforcement? Has the Commission, my particular question would be, has the Commission considered perhaps, so that this is not a repetitive issue, you're working with the Education Department, because if you're saying, culture mustn't be the reason for people's deaths, perhaps it's not so much a thing of dealing with it after the incident has happened, after the deaths, and more of a preventative issue or preventative measure like working with the Education Department. Have you considered even with the schools providing them with the kind of equipment they need and sort of maybe the monitoring that they need to prevent these deaths? So have you considered preventative measures instead of perhaps dealing with it after the incidents have occurred?
Chair, can we provide a response to some of the initial questions? And I can take questions.
Thank you so much. The first question has to do with whether we have let the communities or institutions know about this announcement. And what happens if they do not adhere to our call for suspension? First is that we make our declaration of suspension known as we speak. The reason for this is that other organs of state have been on the ground dealing with these matters, and we who are tasked with the responsibility of protection and promotion have to guide how best to ensure that culture on its own has the potential of ensuring life-giving rather than life-taking. So this is our forte, and we're working hand in hand with other relevant stakeholders like COCTA, like traditional leaders on these matters. What happens if they continue to do as they wish? Yes, you may have heard when I raised the issue in the statement, that it is important that each and every role players must come to the party. We talk about Department of Health, Department of Social Development, we talk about NPA, the police, traditional leaders, families, because these matters are community matters. They involve a number of people. So if they continue to do as they wish, we call upon the NPA, we call upon the SPA, South African Police, to intervene, because it is within the limit of the scope of mandate to make sure that culture is preserved, the product of culture is life-giving, and that these young men, when they go to the initiation schools, they come back alive. So we are going to make sure we play our oversight and monitoring role as a commission. Remember, our powers do not lie in ourselves, they lie in Parliament. And we refer to the agents or organs of state to assist in implementing the decisions of this organization. The banning of 4 areas, or 4 regions. And of course, you have raised the fact that year after year, make recommendations, but things continue as usual. Let me cite our first intervention in Gauteng, where we suspended initiation for 2 years. Only this year in May, they were able to open their schools. And our assessment so far is that the deaths, criminality that existed then have been reduced. We are yet to see escalations in those areas, but so far there is a sense of compliance. There may be other problems that we face, but there is a sense that communities are complying to making sure that the young men come back alive from initiation schools. The 4 regions, remember these regions are large. When you talk about Tambo, it's not just one place, there are many places. Which is why in our statement we made the reference to where deaths occurred. That is a determining point. Where deaths occurred. That school must be shut down, and if there are children in that school, they must be taken to a place of safety, because we believe we can't continue to see yet other young people die in that place. Already, as I speak, the traditional leaders, the Department of Health and others are busy doing this. We are reinforcing their hand to making sure that we should not experience similar deaths again. Okay. So we are quite clear about where we are ensuring that suspension should take place. The determining factor is that if there's deaths in that place, we shut it down. We suspend it. Subject to compliance, because over the year, we'll be in conversation to try to make sure that the structure is in place, to making sure that that conversation leads into compliance. If that happens, obviously, we'll be convinced to open the initiation school in that area. Contingency measures. I think I tried to answer that by saying that already on the ground, what we are calling for with regard to shutting down and removing young people is already taking place. And the contingency measures are contingent upon the structures on the ground, the traditional leaders, the NPA, health department, social development. Those are the departments that we work with. We are not on the ground to do the day-to-day work, but we refer our work to those agencies that are active on the ground. I think the whole issue again of continued activity as if nothing has happened has been raised. Our view is that this will not be business as usual. We'll be monitoring, we'll be calling on the agencies to actively participate to ensure compliance. And because we have seen how the death of young people has become a new normal. We have become desensitized about the value of life. It is important that life should be protected, life should be nurtured. It is the role of all of us, including the stakeholders I've mentioned, to make sure that this reality happens. Preventative measures in dealing with some of these problems. A part of it is that we have Section 7, which is a committee of CRL Commission. They go to all provinces, meet traditional leaders, meet stakeholders, even committees that are responsible for initiating schools. We have been to some of these places. So it is important that we are proactive in preventing this. There has been a number of campaigns. I think the Department of the traditional leaders, including the Department of Social Development, have been engaged in a number of active campaigns to make sure that we stem some of these criminal activities, because majority of them stem from criminal activities and commercialization of the practice. Majority of deaths could be attributed to circumcision that is done by young people who have no experience at all. And this is a cause for concern for us. Hence, we call for training of those that are going to become surgeons and nurses to ensure the safety of this tradition. Thank you so much. Okay. We have, I think he's just reminding me that we have got the PE, which is a public education program and engagement program for the Commission. That program is engaged in providing education throughout the province and throughout the country. So one of the key responsibilities would be to disseminate this information across the country.
Thanks, Chair. Can I get an indication of further questions, if any? Okay. It looks like Chair, you want to invite comments from the commissioners, or we can conclude?
Now we can close.
Okay. Seeing that there are no further questions, I think we can safely conclude this briefing. Thank you very much, colleagues. For those that might still want the one-on-ones in the chair, you can do that outside. But this briefing is for money agenda. Thank you. The statement will be circulated as you leave the list.
Thank you so much.
And make sure that before you leave, your parking voucher is spent by the lady at the front. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Wrong with the chair.
Yes.